Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Spokane, Washington-based jazz percussionist, composer, and educator Michael Waldrop. We caught up with him to talk about a busy life in music, teaching, his debut 2021 CD, time frames, and hope for the future past COVID. Known well for his critically acclaimed CDs on the Grammy-nominated Origin label, he has performed and recorded extensively in a variety of settings throughout his career. He recently was a featured artist on the Gen Conference in 2016 and 19 with his big band. He's got quite a passion for jazz as both a musician and educator. Enjoy his story. Thank you for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I'm, pleased, happy to do it.
So Time Frames is coming out during a very strange time during a pandemic, and I don't want to know about the timing of you making this actual album, but more of like it coming out right now. What is your thought on this coming out during this time?
Well, I had planned to do it. It's been a couple of years in the making, but I had gotten a grant and a sabbatical from Eastern Washington University, where I work, to do this solo. It's a classical percussion album. I had gotten the sabbatical in December of 2019, and then the pandemic hit. But the sabbatical was going to start in the fall of this year. So my plan was to, from June to the end of 2020, work on completing the CD. And I didn't plan for a pandemic. So that, threw quite a few wrenches in the works. But we were able to persevere, and through a combination of remote recording and careful in-person recording. What I mean by remote recording is some of the ensembles, some of the quartets, specifically the Mediterranean Views piece, was recorded in Portland, Oregon, Iowa, Indianapolis, and Memphis, and LA. So there were like 5 different recording locations, one person in a studio, but it was impossible to get a group together. So, but it wasn't as difficult as you would think. There were a few advantages to that in terms of isolating the musicians in terms of recording quality, and it was kind of unlimited editing capabilities. So that was, in some ways, worked out for the best. But ideally, it would have been better to have everyone in the studio at the same time. But the only thing I did together was I did a piece with my wife, a piano and marimba piece, that we were in the studio together in Portland. So, but
right on.
Yeah.
So let me go back a little bit in your life and go to the beginnings. Where were you born and raised, and kind of how did jazz become a part of your radar and your future ambitions?
That's a long story, but I'll try and be quick. I was born in the Southeast. When I was 11, my mother moved to New York State, upstate New York, Ithaca, New York. And that's kind of when I began my serious study of percussion and music. Jazz was always an influence for me. My parents weren't jazz fans particularly, but they bought me Miles Davis, Buddy Rich albums. They were aware enough to know who the great players were at the time. And we're talking in the 70s here, so ancient history. But, I always had good role models and good instruction, because Ithaca College had a really good school of music, and I studied with some very famous people who taught there. And then I went to the University of North Texas for my undergraduate degree, where I played in the jazz program and also studied classical percussion, and ended up getting a doctorate from there in 1999. I completed that. So The doctorate was classical percussion. My master's degree was in jazz studies. So I've always had kind of a diverse interest in both jazz and classical percussion and how they connect to each other, which I think they do, especially more so as time evolves. Genres are kind of being blurred somewhat. So, yeah, that's as brief as I can describe it, I suppose.
Well, no, that's great. So what was the first live jazz show you ever saw that made you think, man, I'd love to get up there and do that?
Well, there were two. I would say three. When I was in junior high school, I saw Maynard Ferguson, which was incredible, and then I saw Herbie Hancock. I was actually supposed to go see Miles Davis play, and he didn't show up. This was 1974, and the warm-up act was Herbie Hancock's Headhunters group, and they were incredible, and that was very influential. And then I got to see Buddy Rich around the same time, and actually got to meet him because my mother was a journalist for this city paper. She took the assignment to interview Buddy Rich, so I got to sit in on an interview of Buddy Rich, and that was incredible. But more incredible was just his playing, to get to see him play live. That was perhaps the moment when I said that's what I wanted to do with my life, because it was so inspirational. So
beautiful. What was the interview like? Was that kind of are there things you remember? Was it groundbreaking for you to see that?
It was funny. He was dressed in like his karate robe and underwear, and my mother walks in, and and he didn't he was completely unashamed of being like half dressed, and but he was really candid and very nice to me, and nice to her. I mean, he was just a great interview. He's just a colorful personality, and but I got to ask him a few questions at the end, and he was really kind, said that gave me advice about how to pursue a career, and good advice that I've taken to this day. So, I mean, his main thing was to listen to older players. He said, if you want to play like me, you need to listen to Shadow Wilson, you need to listen to Sid Catlett, and he was right. Yeah. To understand how someone plays, you have to understand their influences. So,
like influences on you. That obviously seeing Buddy and seeing, the interview. Were there other people in your life that were influential mentors, that mentor-like, that really helped you and have resonated in you all these years?
Well, I mean, some direct teachers. I've had a lot of great teachers. Keith Copeland, who's a drummer from the Northeast. His dad, Ray Copeland, was a jazz trumpet player who played with Max Roach. But Keith Copeland was a great teacher I studied with. Greg Bissonette. And there's another teacher I had at the University of North Texas, Henry Oxdell, who's not well known except for, he's really highly regarded among drum set students of his. He taught most of the players at University of North Texas, and he was a great mentor and teacher. And I've just had tons. And on mallets, I studied with Gordon Stout, who's on this CD, and then all the faculty at North Texas. So, but I have a really wide range of influences. Steve Gadd, Jack DeJohnette, folks like that. I spent, decades trying to, meet their level of playing, and unsuccessfully, but it's made me practice and try and keep moving forward. So it's just a huge list. I listen to a lot of the same people that all the drummers listen to, and vibraphonist, all the usual suspects there: Gary Burton, Joe Locke, Stephen Harris, Milt Jackson. And Terry Gibbs. You mentioned Terry Gibbs, and so I try to be as aware of what happened. The players that came before me as possible, and that's probably the most valuable thing I got from Buddy, because I was really young when he told me that. I didn't know who Shadow Wilson or Sid Catlett were at that time. I was just taking drum lessons and listening to his records and Tower of Power and things that were popular in the day, and that was a really good piece of advice I got from him. So
cool. So if you have a dream tonight, run into your younger self from around the time that you were beginning to become a professional, and you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Wow, that's it's kind of you're like asking me how would I do it again. I would say to just try and be more detached. It's a tough career being a musician, and to not mistakes that I've made in my career have always been about being too emotional about it. Being an artist and a musician is emotional, and you get your ego involved in it. But every kind of problem I've had in my career has been because I've been unable to detach the emotion of being a musician and an artist from the profession. So it's still a profession like any other profession. So and that's a difficult thing for any artist, because it's a society that doesn't really value artists to any great degree. It's a business-oriented society, and but that's the advice I would give myself. That's what I know now after 30 plus years of being in the music business.
Sure.
And that part, the emotional connection you have to music is more just for me and the listeners too, but to try and be professional, you have to learn to kind of detach that. So yeah, that's
right on.
That's the only thing I would do different. I mean, everything else I'm really grateful to have had a career in music, and combination of teaching and playing, mostly teaching for the past 20 years. So, but
cool.
Other than that, I wouldn't say. I would say I don't regret the things that have happened or the career paths I've taken. So,
right on. So, as we kind of start getting the vaccines out there and things are opening up a little bit, how do you see this year unfolding and things kind of changing for you as we get back to what some of the things that we were used to before?
Well, hopefully that process will continue. We're gonna, where I'm teaching now, we're gonna go back to in-person instruction, and live performance will become something we can do again. And I hope to play the music that's on the CD live. The quartet I was mentioning, where we did remotely, the pianist teaches in Indianapolis, so he's said that he would like to try and get that group together and perform the music live. So that's a significant goal. So I don't know how soon that will happen, but perhaps in the fall. But I'm pretty confident they'll get a handle on things. So once the vaccines are fully administered. So
yeah, I have no doubt. So why do you love jazz?
Just well, that's a good question, considering this is quote unquote a classical CD, but I will say that John Bishop at Origin had said that this could be released as a world music / jazz album, and but I wanted it on the classical label. But there's improvisation on this record. It's mostly through compose. So, but what I love about jazz is the improvisational aspect is it's like no other medium in terms of personal expression as being a musician. So that's more satisfying to me than even playing like a piece that I wrote that's composed. So I feel like that's more natural for me. And I actually noticed that on the recordings on some of the pieces that were written for me that were classical in nature but had improvisation. The times where I felt most comfortable were when I was improvising, and I was surprised at that, and I also like the fact that jazz is multicultural, which is the direction everything should be going, in my opinion, in the country and the world, and classical is becoming more multicultural too, so I think that's a good thing too. But jazz from its inception was multicultural, merging, Latin, African American influences and Western classical music. So, yeah, I like that about it. So.
Cool. So everyone has a perception of your family, your friends, fans, students, but you're the one that's leading your life. Who do you think you are?
Who? Perception of me. Well, I'm married, so I'm a husband first. So, but after that, the largest part of my identity as being a musician, a percussionist. So, and a teacher. So I'm, that's a very important part of my relationship to the world, is how my students do, which I've had some students do, most of them do very well, both musically and professionally. So, a big NBA fan. So I don't know. That's such a broad question. I don't know how I can effectively answer that. So.
Well, no, you hit it. That's exactly what I was looking for. So, hey, man, thank you for taking some time out today for Neon Jazz. Good luck with the album and the return to the stage. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks so much, Joe.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Spokane, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Michael for his time, music, and story. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit Neon Jazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.